The Pittsburgh Steelers find themselves in a state of uncertainty regarding Aaron Rodgers' future, leaving the franchise in a difficult position as they weigh their options at quarterback. Speculation has surrounded Rodgers for months, yet the Steelers remain in the dark about his next move. The question looms, what happens if Rodgers ultimately decides to retire? The Steelers, a franchise historically built on stability, must act decisively. The most logical approach would be to draft a quarterback, while also exploring the remaining options in free agency. With Rodgers' status uncertain, the Steelers could pivot toward veterans like Joe Flacco or Carson Wentz, both of whom are still available. However, missing out on Wentz wouldn't drastically alter their trajectory. The team is expected to address the quarterback position in the draft, likely targeting a signal caller early. Even if they were to secure Rodgers for a short-term run, at 41 years old, he would not be a long-term solution. The Steelers understand the necessity of identifying and developing their next franchise quarterback sooner rather than later. Meanwhile, the Minnesota Vikings have subtly kept the door open regarding a potential pursuit of Aaron Rodgers later in the offseason. General Manager Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah did not explicitly rule out the possibility, fueling speculation about whether the Vikings might consider the four-time MVP. However, league insiders remain skeptical. Historically, general managers avoid completely dismissing any scenario, opting instead for measured responses that leave room for flexibility. The Vikings, who lost Daniel Jones to the Colts, had to explore all options in the event that their young quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, isn't ready to start immediately. While Rodgers remains on their radar in theory, the team ultimately decided against making a move. Could that stance change if McCarthy suffers a setback in his development? Potentially. But as of now, the Vikings are fully committed to McCarthy as their future quarterback, believing he has the tools to lead the franchise forward. The New York Giants, another team navigating a quarterback conundrum, recently added Russell Wilson to a room that already featured Tommy DeVito and Jameis Winston. Does Wilson's arrival take them out of the quarterback market in the draft? Not necessarily. The Giants have options, and an early quarterback selection remains a strong possibility. Holding the second pick of the second round, they could opt to trade back into the first round if they identify a prospect they believe in. If the Giants view the gap between Shatter Sanders, Tyler Shaw, and Jalen Milroe as minimal, they could prioritize a defensive playmaker like Travis Hunter with their top pick and still secure a quarterback later. The Giants, much like the Steelers and Browns, recognize that Winston and Wilson are short-term solutions. The search for their franchise quarterback continues, and they will likely take action sooner rather than later. Shatter Sanders presents one of the most intriguing storylines in this year's draft. Some analysts believe he could be selected as high as second or third overall if a team like the Browns or Giants falls in love with his skill set. However, if those teams pass on him, his landing spot becomes far less certain. Sanders could end up sliding into the mid to late first round, with teams like the Saints, Steelers, and Jets emerging as possible destinations. The uncertainty surrounding his draft stock reflects the unpredictable nature of quarterback evaluations. Unlike previous years when the top signal callers were locked in early, this year's class remains fluid, and teams are still finalizing their assessments. Deion Sanders has been vocal about his son's NFL future, expressing confidence that any quarterback-needy franchise will be lucky to have him. The former NFL great mentioned teams like the Raiders and Saints as potential fits, but at this stage, no outcome is set in stone. The belief that Cam Ward is destined to be the first overall pick to the Titans has gained momentum, yet beyond that, nothing is guaranteed. As the draft approaches, quarterback movement remains a focal point, with teams still weighing their options. One name rising up draft boards is Jackson Dart, who has turned heads with his strong performances in pre-draft workouts. His pro day offers another opportunity to solidify his standing among scouts and executives. The willingness to compete and showcase his skills at the combine set him apart, and there is a growing belief that he could be drafted higher than initially projected. Teams in the mid to late first round, such as the Saints and Steelers, have been linked to Dart, making his draft ceiling an intriguing subplot to follow. Could Dart actually be selected ahead of Shatter Sanders? While not widely expected, it's not out of question. Quarterback evaluations remain highly subjective, and a team that prefers Dart's skill set could decide to pull the trigger earlier than anticipated. If a team like the Giants doesn't view Sanders as worthy of the third overall pick and opts for a different position, and if the Saints are higher on Dart, then a scenario where Dart is selected ahead of Sanders isn't impossible. With the draft rapidly approaching, speculation will only intensify. Teams are still refining their quarterback evaluations, and surprises are inevitable. The Steelers, Vikings, Giants, and Saints all have critical decisions to make, with franchise-altering implications. As the NFL offseason continues to unfold, the quarterback carousel remains the league's most compelling narrative, with Aaron Rodgers, Shatter Sanders, and Jackson Dart at the center of the conversation.